Hello, everyone. So this session is on how to become a wildlife and environmental journalist. And as I've just been introduced very nicely, this is by me, Dawood Qureshi. I'm a marine biologist, freelance journalist, wildlife filmmaker, podcast host, speaker, etc., etc. Way too many titles, but I like to do a lot. So who am I and why am I here speaking to you about this topic? So as I've said, I'm a journalist. Some of you have seen my work that I've done, some of the writing that I've done for various magazines and various blogs. And I've just completed my degree in marine biology at the University of Portsmouth. I do blogging and speaking. And in that sense, I do a lot of writing, and I do a wide range of writing for a lot of different places. But in terms of environmental and conservation writing, that's always been at the heart of everything that I do, and that's always been something that has interested me since I was very young. Something I'm extremely passionate, enthusiastic about, and it's something that's really run its course throughout my life and has really helped me with everything else that I do. In terms of who I am as a person. There's a few words here that you've probably seen before on my Twitter if you follow me, like non-binary, person of color, queer, etc. These are things that I think I need to draw attention to whenever I introduce myself in any capacity, because they are things that define me in a way. The work I do defines me, and who I am and how I identify defines me. And this is something that needs to be drawn attention to because of the lack of representation there is in the journalism community for people of color, for queer people, etc. And therefore, by drawing attention to this, hopefully I provide some of that representation, and hopefully I provide something for people to look at if they can't find anything else to relate to. So why am I a journalist and a writer? And I think this is a question that everyone needs to ask themselves if they are looking to go into this industry. They need to ask themselves, why do I want to be this? So I thought it'd be helpful to tell you why I'm a journalist and a writer. So I've got a few words here: storytelling, perspectives, narratives. So storytelling has really been at the core of everything that I do. I've always been so passionate about telling stories, and that's always been something that has forced me almost in a positive way to write and to go after stories and to share perspectives and to share narratives. Because to me, storytelling is one of the most powerful things that we can do as human beings. It's one of the things that we can do and we can use to change the world. And so for me, storytelling has always been something that I wanted to pursue. And that has come through writing. The early days of blogging, where I blogged about anything that I could see in the garden, any wildlife that I could see, that's how I got into writing in the first place. So I would always recommend people to just write, to get into storytelling, to really understand what it is they're passionate about when they're writing, because that's something that really gets you off to a head start. And when I discovered journalism and I discovered what it can do and how you can write from different perspectives and narratives and how you can write for different organizations, this was the next step for me, because I'd always loved storytelling, and now I was storytelling for other people to convey a message to other people. And underneath over here, you've got I've got making a difference, which is something that I really found intriguing and really found something that attracted me to journalism, because it can make a difference. And instead of just writing for yourself, you're now writing to change other people's minds. And why environmental and wildlife journalism? So I've talked about before my passion for wildlife, my passion for nature, and that's always been at the center and a cornerstone of everything that I do and everything that I work towards, all of my filmmaking projects, podcasting projects, etc. These projects all stem and all revolve around my passion for nature, my passion for wildlife. And so it seemed that this was my niche. So I talked to a high-profile journalist a long time ago, where I asked them the question, how do I break into the journalism industry? How do I break into the industry, and how do I write for big organizations and big magazines like The Guardian, like BBC Wildlife, because that's what I want to do. I want to be a renowned journalist, I said to them. And they told me that you need to find a niche. You need to find something that you're passionate about, something you're good at, something you feel that you can write about from your own perspective and from your own experience. And for me, that is environmental and wildlife journalism. So I think anyone who wants to be a wildlife journalist, you can be, but it needs to come from a place of passion. It needs to come from a place where you care about the environment and you care about conservation, because that is almost the cornerstone of environmental and nature writing. So as I've just talked about, you need to find your niche. So understanding your niche. So it's good to write about a lot of things, and it's good to have a range of experiences and skills, as I think I do. So, and that sounds kind of braggy, but what I'm trying to say is I was always told as a child that I needed to focus. You know, I needed to focus on just one thing. And in a way, they were right. So I do a lot of things and I write about a lot of things. And if you look at the work that I do, my work does range from politics to diversity to lifestyle to film to nature. And I like writing about a lot of things. But at the core of everything, as I've said before, nature and the environment is always at that core. And when you want to make it as a journalist, like that other journalist told me, you need to understand these niche markets and the trends. And especially when you're pitching to different places and you want them to accept your pitches, you need to understand that they want a specific opinion on one thing sometimes from some people. And if they see that you aren't focused on that ideology, and if you aren't focused on that idea, they usually won't take your pitch. So it's very useful to understand where your niche is. And I'll talk about that a bit later, but really your niche comes from what you're interested in and from what you know you can write about confidently. Because someone who writes confidently about things, you can tell they're writing confidently, as opposed to someone who doesn't really know what they're writing about. So, there's a lot of writing over here, but that's what it's all about. So an essential tool in the box, if you like, of a journalist is pitching. Pitching is what got me off the ground in terms of being a journalist. As I've said, I always loved wildlife. I always loved nature. I loved doing volunteering. I love doing work in the field, and I love blogging. But in order to become a journalist and actually write for places, you need to pitch to them. And to pitch to places, you need to have a certain structure. So I was always told that pitches need to be at least 2 to 3 paragraphs of writing about the idea that you're talking about. And it's not an excerpt from the article that you're going to write. Specifically, it's always about the idea. And so I've got a few points over here. So ideas list, notebook, wall. What does that mean? So I have notebooks. I have lists of ideas on my phone. I have a wall where I put lots of my sticky notes and lots of my notes and ideas. And what this does for me, it allows me to collate my ideas, and it allows me to put my ideas together. And that means I can really work out what I want to pitch. And this is really essential. You need to pitch lots and lots of ideas, and don't be deterred by being turned down, because I was and still am all the time, because I'm still starting out my career. I'm very, very green in these areas, like it or not. I'm still turned down most of the time by organizations, because they'll say, oh, we don't want to do this at this specific time, or maybe someone else has done it. But your time will come, because if you feel passionately enough about an idea, that idea deserves to be written about. And you need to really believe in the pitch, because that is something that will get the pitch through. When an editor can see that you believe in the pitch and that you are passionate about that pitch, then they will take that pitch. And something that I was also told early on is to be opinionated. Magazines, places that put articles on their websites, they don't want just the facts. They want your opinion. They want the feeling, and they want the passion that you have for that subject, and all of your experience. They want that all to come together in an article that is opinionated. The last point I think is also extremely important. It really helps to know about the subject, because once you know about the subject and once you've done your research and really understand the subject, then you can form a connection to that subject. And especially when it comes to wildlife and environmental journalism, because that connection is essential to writing about wildlife. Whenever I talk about wildlife, whenever I do films about wildlife, the connection to the wildlife and the connection to the environment is absolutely essential. So that's one thing that you need to get into your head when you're pitching to environmental and conservation magazines, is that whatever you're pitching about, you need to have a connection to that.
Sorry, just 1 second. Andrew R, could you please stop reactivating your microphone, please? Because we hear whatever you're doing in the background. Thank you.
Oh, sorry.
That's fine. I wondered what that scratching was, and I thought it was maybe a moth or something, but never mind. So this is leading on from that, examples of my work and how I write. So I've just got a few examples here of 4 slightly different but or quite different in some cases, articles that I've written for various different magazines. So the first one is for an online magazine called Bloom and Doom Mag. And Bloom and Doom Mag, I will talk about later because they're very useful because they take on a lot of volunteer writers and nature writers. And that's somewhere I will point anyone who wants to go and start writing about nature is Bloom and Doom Mag. They have Facebook groups, they're on Twitter, they're on social media, and they are a place you should go if you want to start writing. And I wrote this article, which was particularly useful to me because it's an interview with someone called the Urban Birder, who some of you may know, and otherwise known as David Lindo. And for this, what happens sometimes with article writing is the editor will give you a list of subjects and you need to pick one of those subjects. And usually with me, what I'd done before was write from what I knew, and I came up with the pictures myself. So this was an entirely new world for me. I came across these pictures that were set forward by the editors, and I picked them out, and I decided that I wanted this based on what I knew, my experiences, and what I wanted to write about. And so this specific title was An Interview with David Lindo. And for me, that stood out, and it didn't stand out to me just because I loved birds and I'd seen David Lindo on Spring Watch and I'd seen him on other productions, and I really, really wanted to write about him, but also because I had a connection with him. So I had him as a friend on Facebook, and that helped me enormously. And I'm going to talk about connections later, but it really helps enormously when you have connections directly with the person, because I was able to have a Zoom interview with David Lindo. And this is an example of an interview article. Now, an interview article is different from this next article, which I wrote on trophy hunting for Nature's Gold magazine, another magazine which I will point people to because they are useful for volunteer writers to go to, and certainly very useful for me to get my work off the ground. So this article and this article, both of these, the top ones, are articles that contain interviews. The first article is an article written directly around the interview. So all of my research comes from the interview, and a bit of research on the man himself. But basically, I interviewed David Lindo on Zoom, talked to him about his work, and wrote an article on what he thought about various subjects. And this next article is on trophy hunting. So it's not actually about the person I'm interviewing, but I interviewed someone called Ryan Dalton, who does a podcast called Into the Wild, which I was on, and he did a podcast episode on trophy hunting, and I decided he would be a useful person to talk to. Now, this second article is about research and interview, because you have to talk about the subject of trophy hunting, but you have to intertwine the interview as well. So it's useful when you're writing an article, especially when you're doing wildlife and conservation and you are doing interviews, to understand that the difference between interviews and the difference between interviews and research. This one down here is an article I did for Wildlife Trust Wales, and this one is very useful for people, I think, to understand, because it talks about when I researched other people. So I researched a group of women of color who were doing great things for climate change. And this article was basically to inspire other people to do things for climate change. And so I researched them and I wrote about them and later contacted them, asking them if it was okay that I put them in the article. And they, of course, said yes. As you can see, very different. I didn't interview them. And this last article is one that I feel very, very passionate about, and that's the personal articles. So personal articles are where you write from your own experiences, and you do a bit of research around the topic, but most of the content of the article will come from your own experiences. These are very prominent in wildlife and conservation journalism, because people want to hear your passion. They want to hear your experiences. They want to hear about what you've done in the world around this subject. So this one for me was a very useful article to write, and actually one that did kind of make my career take off a bit more than some of the other articles, and is actually one that I wrote before any of the other articles. So I've talked about some of my work, and hopefully you maybe understand the differences between these different types of articles, and the fact that you can write all of these when you do wildlife journalism, because it is such a varied topic. This kind of touches on what I was talking about with David Lindo, but this is extremely important when you're doing especially wildlife journalism. Links and connections are extremely important, most of the time more so than qualifications, as I've said over here. So I have a degree in marine biology. I have some qualifications in writing, but to be honest, my connections with people and the friends I've made on Twitter, on LinkedIn, on Facebook, the people I've talked to over time, when I've done volunteering for the Wildlife Trust, when I've done volunteering for the RSPB, when I've gone out into the field, when I've talked to different people, people who aren't even journalists, who aren't even writers, the authors that I've talked to, these help me a lot more than my qualifications. It's useful to have qualifications, but your links and who you know are the most, probably, I think, the most important thing alongside passion when you're writing wildlife and conservation articles, because these people know things and you can learn from them and they can direct you to various places, because the wildlife and conservation journalism industry is not the same as other journalism industries. It's not on the same, it doesn't work on the same plane. There are articles in different places. They work in different magazines which just work with wildlife and conservation. So you usually need to be pointed to them or need to find things out through different people in the industry, and it can be very useful to talk to people. Some of the things that I did that really, really helped me in my career are seminars, talks, and science festivals. And all of them that I've gone to are free. Because, you know, as a student just coming out of a degree, I'm not the richest person, and I'm sure not many people are the richest people and can't just pay for seminars and talks and science festivals. But in the era of Zoom now, you can do things like that. You can go to seminars for free. You can go to seminars that are far, far away across the other side of the world. And you can listen to talks by very experienced, very qualified people and learn a lot from them. And that's what I would very much recommend: networking and talking to people. Definitely, when you go to science festivals online, it's much easier to find people's contacts, to ask people for emails, to talk to people. Talking to people online, in person, these are some of the most useful skills you'll have as a journalist, but especially as a wildlife journalist. Again, kind of drawing on that same thing, degrees help, but aren't necessary. So I have a degree in marine biology, but like I said, my passion for nature and the environment is the most useful thing that I've got. My experiences and the interest that I've had when I grew up, you know, looking around in gardens. I grew up in an urban area with no garden and no reserve near to me. Those interests that I've had and the experiences that I've had growing up around wildlife and nature have helped me far more than what my degree has done. My degree is useful, but all of the article work that I've gotten has come from extracurricular work that I've done myself. That when I've gone online and I've looked for papers to write for, I've looked for people to write for, I've pitched to different people, and that's what you need to do. And you need to, I think everyone needs to understand that they don't need to be disheartened that they don't have a degree in STEM or journalism or nature or any environmental science, because those are useful and they are extremely interesting. And I've loved the research that I've done in marine biology, and I hope to continue that research in the future and to use it to help me, but it doesn't need to be for anyone, for everyone. Anyone can write. As I've written here. And if you try hard enough in your spare time and you rack up that experience and you use your interest and your passion to write, that can be the most useful and treasured thing to an editor that's looking for someone to write a specific article, especially in nature and conservation. That being said, experience might be necessary. So when an editor is looking for someone to write for them, they're looking for someone who's got a specific spin on something. They're looking for someone who's got that little gleam that they're looking for, that they want to write for them. I've recently accepted a position as an editor of a small startup online magazine, and what I look for is people who have experiences in certain things. When I say experience, I don't mean loads and loads of experience in writing. Like I've said, there are places where you can start off and you can just write when you've had no writing experience. The experience that I want is a specific experience. So this can come actually from researching your subject and passion for your subject. So when you know about a subject and when you have studied a subject, that makes you qualified to write about that subject because you have a passion for that subject. And if you're going to write a evidence-thick article, obviously you will need to be citing and things like that, but you can learn how to do that online. That is not the most useful thing when you're writing. The most useful thing when you're writing is to have an experience, an opinion, and to have a core message. And I'm going to talk more about the different subjects that you can specialize in when you're doing environmental and nature conservation journalism, because a lot of people think that you do need to be qualified for this when you don't necessarily have to be. Like I've said over here, in order to gain those passions and in order to gain those experiences and in order to gain those necessary interests to write for various places, that might mean narrowing down your subject matter. So I've said before, you need to find your niche, and this is extremely useful in the next slide when I talk about, or in the next few slides when I talk about what subjects you might need to specialize in. So this is a quote that I found very relatable, I think. So it's all storytelling, you know, that's what journalism is all about. To me, that is the core aspect of journalism. Journalism for me has always been about the storytelling. It's always been about conveying that message. It's always been about conveying that perspective and sharing that narrative that you find anywhere around you. And this quote really stands out to me because it has the word storytelling on it. And I'll go on and on and on about storytelling, you know, till the cows come home, because it really is for me a core aspect of my journalism career, and what I hope for my journalism career and all aspects of my career to be is about storytelling. So for everyone else, find that message, find that core aspect of why you want to write, because that will help you write more and that will help to motivate you to write on days when you really feel like you can't write anything or you're too tired to do anything. So this is what I've talked about briefly before, but I'm going to go into a bit more. The environmental, conservation and journalism categories. Now, for this, I think it's very important for people to understand it's not black and white. You know, it's not, these aren't specific categories and they are only these categories. These are examples of a few of the categories that you can go into if you want to write for environmental magazines and if you want to do environmental journalism, but it does help to know about the various places that you can go. So I think here, these are some of the questions you need to ask yourself. Like I said at the beginning, there are questions you need to ask yourself when you want to become a wildlife journalist. So what do I have experience in? What could I have experience in? And what am I passionate about? These kind of revolve around the same subject. If you have experience, like I've said before, and if you have interest in subjects, and if you're passionate about subjects, that will make it a hell of a lot easier to write about those subjects. And that will make it, that will make these articles that you write more appealing to editors, because editors can see when you're passionate about a subject, and they can see when someone's had a specific experience in a subject that other people can relate to. If you don't have experience in a subject, I would usually recommend not writing about that subject. If you're not passionate about a subject, generally don't write for it. Of course, there are situations where you will have to write about things if you are a journalist and you work for a specific company or organization. There are times when you will have to write about things that you aren't passionate about. But overall, when it comes to nature and conservation journalism, being passionate about the subject makes for a much better article. So these are some of the different sectors that I've sort of worked out of environmental and conservation journalism. And if anyone wants, they can tweet at me or email me or anything if they think that any of these might be wrong, or if they think that they have extra guidance, because I'm here to learn as much as you guys. I'm just starting out in my career like you guys, you know, I'm green in this, if you like. So I like to split up into these different ones. So STEM, conservation, environmental, and nature literature. So I put STEM, biology, entomology, herpetology, cetology, blah, blah, blah. So big, long words, not really necessary, but just kind of there to make a point. So entomology, study of insects, everyone probably knows this. Herpetology, I've seen some of your guys' Twitter, so I'm pretty sure you guys know a lot more about this than I probably do. Herpetology, study of amphibians and reptiles. Cetology, study of cetaceans, whales and dolphins. So sometimes, and I've been asked to write about these before, these are STEM heavy articles. So these have a lot of scientific fact. You need to cite your references in them, and it almost becomes like a mini sort of dissertation, but more accessible. Because what you're trying to talk about here is scientific fact, and you could be passionate about this, you could have a background in this, and that would make you qualified to write an article about STEM subjects, like science subjects. And that's a big part of environmental and conservation journalism, because a big part of it is the science and how things work. And I did an article recently about the intelligence of cetaceans, whales and dolphins. And for that, I used knowledge I'd gained in my degree, but more so the knowledge that I researched online, because my degree wasn't specifically around that subject, but I was passionate about it. And I'm passionate about the intelligence and behavior of whales and dolphins. And so I decided that I was going to write about that because that's something I was passionate about. And even if I wasn't specifically trained in that subject, I did my research. And that required a lot of citations, a lot of scientific theory, and a lot of facts around that subject. Conservation. So this usually, articles that revolve around conservation usually revolve around your experience, and they usually revolve around policy. So I did another article a while back on my volunteering experience, and I talked about green belts, and I talked about the policies around green belts and the policies around brownland and environments that aren't conserved as well in the UK, and environments that are conserved in the UK. For this, you might need to research policy. You might need to have experience in those areas. You might need to have done volunteering to have that passion, have that interest for that subject. Although, you know, if you don't have that experience, you can still do an article on that subject. Environmental. This was a kind of blurred lined subject because it does also link into conservation and STEM, and it deals mainly with climate change, politics, and human involvement and human interaction. So the article that I had on a previous slide that talked about the women of color that were doing things for climate change and were doing things for the environment, that would be an example of maybe an environmental journalistic approach, because I'm talking about climate change, I'm talking about policy, and I'm talking about a lot about human and wildlife interaction, which is something you might not need to talk about if you're talking about, for example, a STEM article, because you're focusing on involvement. And with all of these, remember, it does have to have an element of opinionated views. It has to have an element of passion, it has to have an element of experience. Even if it looks like it's just going to be a logical clinical article, it has to have something that shows that it's your article, because then no one will want to read it. Because the reason people want to read articles is because, you know, like it or not, it's from you. It's that passion and interest that is gleaming through. One of my favorite journalism sort of subsections, if you like, is nature literature. So these are articles that are more emotional connection and less factual approach, as opposed to the scientific heavy STEM approach articles. So these could be, you know, reviews of memoirs, reviews of books on wildlife and conservation, and maybe something that talks about your experience out in nature. So I did an article, and I used to do a lot of these at the beginning of my blogging and article career, where I just talked about me going out into nature and experiencing it. And that was a lot of the article that I did that I showed you in the previous slide that I wrote for A Focus on Nature, which is a youth-led organization, another useful organization that I will point you in the direction of. But I wrote that article from my own personal experience. So there didn't need to be a lot of scientific theory in that. There didn't need to be a lot of facts about wildlife and animals. There just needed to be my experience, my passion, my interest in nature. And these are very useful articles to be able to write in environmental and conservation journalism, because a lot of people want them. A lot of people want other people to experience that connection of nature through your connection, so that they can then go out and experience that from themselves. Like I've explained before, there is a difference between your own experiences and interviewing someone else for theirs and how these are written. Because obviously, if you're writing about a subject and about an experience from your own interest and from your own experience, that's going to be very different than writing an article based on someone else's experiences and something you've interviewed someone else on. The bottom line, which I like to tell everyone, and which I wish was told to me more when I was starting out in environmental and conservation journalism and thought, I can't possibly write for this, I'm not qualified. Wildlife and environmental journalism is extremely varied. You can see right here from this list, any number of people can write for it. Tons of people can, whether or not you're qualified or not in certain subjects, you can. You just have to have that passion, that interest, and that core message. So a very important thing that you need to have, I think, under your belt, especially when you're doing any kind of journalism, but especially when you're doing environmental and conservation journalism, is experience. Experience is a key tool, along with knowing how to pitch. So the title here says, should I write for free? Something I did, which I wish someone had told me not to do so much of in the beginning, is write for free. Because whilst it gains you experience, and whilst it gains you that necessary experience and that necessary interest in the subject matter you're writing, it can drain you, and you're not getting very much back from it. except for seeing your articles in the blog space or in the magazines. So I've listed these voluntary organizations like Bloom and Doom Magazine, Nature's Gold, and these magazines are on Facebook, they're on Instagram, they're on Twitter. They have groups, which I will point you in the direction of. They have specific startups, which are for entry-level writers and journalists, and you can go and write for them. And I have done many times and still do, because they help you to get your writing out into the world without needing to have too much experience in writing. And that can be extremely useful for entry-level journalists. So I've written here, the more experiences you have, the better your chances of writing for more organizations. It's so true. An editor of a top-level magazine or paper or blog like The Guardian or like BBC Wildlife may look at your experience on your CV and judge whether or not they want you to write an article for them that you've pitched based on what you've written for other people, because from that, they can glean that you'll be a useful person to write for them. Whilst I said experience isn't totally necessary, it may well be when you go to higher up papers and magazines. It's not necessarily something that's necessary when you're at an entry-level position. And like I said before, your time is precious. Don't give it away for free if you don't have to. You and your experiences and the interests you have and the passion you have, that should be treasured above all else. These are experiences which no one else can gain. They're experiences from your own, almost your own lifetime. And these are experiences from your past, maybe, or experiences that you are yet to gain. They are yours, and you don't need to give them away for free if you don't have to. So this is something, again, that I wish someone would have told me in the beginning. These are things that I had to go out and look for myself. And whilst it is very useful to go out and look for yourself, and I would very much encourage people to go out and look for organizations, magazines, papers. You can search online, Environmental Nature Magazine. You can go on Twitter. There are tons of people on Twitter advertising for various spaces, and various wildlife organizations which want you to write for them are advertising everywhere. I wish that someone would have given me a bit of a list just to get me off the ground, and just so I could write up where to write for, because one of the lists I have on my wall, in amongst all the various colored sticky notes and chaos of various notes and things of articles I have to write and articles I want to write, are lists of organizations that I'm going to pitch for, lists of organizations that I think I should pitch for, and lists of organizations that I need to research further, and whether or not I think I should pitch to them is kind of in the gray, but it helps to have this catalogue of pitches and of magazines to pitch for. So you will have seen some of these. Bloom and Doom Magazine, as I've said before, extremely useful. They're a voluntary organization, so they don't pay anyone, unfortunately, but they do provide a very good stepping stone for entry-level journalists to just write and to just get articles off their chest. And they have editors that will help you write for them. And certainly for me, when I've written for them and when I've pitched articles for them, these articles have gone through at least 2 or 3 different edits before they become the article at the end that I think, oh my God, that's much better than what I wrote in the beginning, but it's still all my words and it's still all my work. And they help you to do that. And you can apply for jobs there, you can apply for positions there, but more importantly, you can write. And you need to write when you're going to be a journalist. You just need to, get it off your chest. You need to write, you need to get those ideas out there. Nature's Gold magazine, a very, very amazing magazine, and one that I wrote the trophy hunting article for. And them as well, they do the same sort of thing. They are a voluntary-led magazine, so unfortunately they don't pay, but they give you the chance to get your writing off the ground and to really get pitches into the sort of brains of editors, and for editors to tell you, that's not a good pitch, that could work, this could work if you do this. For example, for Bloom and Doom magazine, I had a pitch that I gave to someone and they said it would be very useful to split this into 2 and to make 2 articles out of it. And once we worked together on it and wrote together, we realized that actually there are 2 full articles in this, what I thought was before just one idea. Big one over here, BBC Wildlife magazine. I've provided the link there, which will be, this whole presentation will be up for everyone to look at afterwards. That link there is to contribute stories, to contribute articles to BBC Wildlife magazine. with big organizations like The Guardian and BBC Wildlife Magazine, they are hard to pitch to because you do need a certain level of experience sometimes. But what I've found is just go for it, because I was always scared of pitching to these larger magazines because I thought, I don't have enough experience. I don't have something that they would be interested in. But how do you know is the question. How do you know you're not going to be the right person for them to write that article? And I did, and I've had some success in that area, I'm pleased to say. But even getting your name into their minds and into their books is a very useful thing. And like I said before, take time with the pitch, take time with what you're writing, and make sure it is to the point and it is clear and it is something that you would be proud to look at, as well as the editor. I've got some organizations over here. These are different than the specifically magazines and blogs, because they are organizations that aren't necessarily writing organizations. So the RSPB, the Woodland Trust, the Beaver Trust are all places that I've written for, but for them, and I'll come on to this in the next slide, what's useful is to trawl through their social media, to have them on social media, to constantly know and be updated on their status, because that's where they will ask for articles. They won't put it necessarily on their websites, but they'll ask you on social media, could someone write an article about this? Would anyone be interested in giving a film or a talk about this? Would anyone be interested in contributing this? And it's very useful to check those updates, because whilst they aren't writing organizations, whilst they aren't magazines, they are huge organizations. They have a high readership, and they have a lot of people who will scout you out and look for you, and certainly have done for me, and will look at the writing and go, that's who we want to write or speak for these various places, because we've seen that these organizations, which are trustworthy, have chosen them. Like I've said, we've got some heavy hitters here, like the Guardian Environment, which is a very useful place to pitch for if you want to do environmental and conservation journalism, because the Guardian Environment have a high readership of environmentalists, scientists, etc. And they are also very prominently known in the scientific and environmental arena. The Wildlife Trust, somewhere that I have been very pleasantly surprised with in terms of what they produce and what content they give out. They're very good to get into contact with, and to ask how to write or what to write. In terms of who to contact, it's very different from the magazines in that they don't have a specific person to pitch to. But if you're on Facebook, if you're on Twitter, if you're on LinkedIn especially, which is where I get a lot of my links and get a lot of my connections, you can find the specific people to pitch to. So it's very useful to be on social media and to really understand what these organizations want at specific times, because again, relevance, like I've said before, is part of the niche. Part of being a journalist is knowing what information is relevant and knowing when and where it's relevant. Excuse me. And I've touched on this before, and I will touch on it many, many more times, how to stand out. Experience will help you a hell of a lot in the wildlife and conservation journalism arena. You know, if you sort of do what I did in the beginning, which is do a lot of writing for yourself, that can show people that you want to write. If you do a lot of writing for other places, that can show people that you're qualified to write. You know, just write is one of the main things that I would say to people. So next steps. So I think this kind of clarifies everything that I've been talking about, and all of the different things that I've talked about in terms of how to write, in terms of what to do next. So pitch, 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 pitch to loads of different places. It doesn't matter if you're denied, just try again, get feedback. It's a useful place to get feedback. It's a useful place to get into editors' mindsets. It can be very sad when a pitch that you've worked on and put your entire passion and interest to gets turned down, unfortunately, but it does happen, and it is part of the process, unfortunately. I wish it wasn't, because it's terrible every single time, but pitching is an extremely useful thing, and pitching helps you to write in your own stead, because what it does is it helps you to bottle down what ideas you want to write about. And for me, sometimes I've got an idea and I don't know how I'm going to write about it, and then I pitch it and I go, that's how I want to write about it. And then the article comes from pitching to it. I don't usually write the article before I've pitched the article. Networking is extremely important, as I've said. Be on LinkedIn, be on Twitter, be on Facebook. Twitter especially is a real hub for journalists. and it's a real hub for environmental and conservation journalists especially. I do a lot of other journalism and a lot of other work writing for other things, but for me, Twitter is where I've got to grips with all the different people, all the different volunteers, the scientists, etc. Writing for others, that's a big part of gaining experience and a big part of pitching. You can blog, and it will be extremely useful to gain experience. And I would very much encourage people to keep a blog and to write for themselves. But writing for others is really where it's at almost, because that's where you gain experience for other people and you gain perspectives you never would have realized before. I remember writing for myself and really writing about experiences and things that I thought only I would really understand. And then I pitched it to other people and got their perspective on it and really understood that, oh, that's a different perspective that I'd not thought about before, or that's something that I need to think about when I'm writing in the future, because when you're in your own head, you don't really get many other narratives or stories coming in. And that's what I really love about journalism, is getting all those other stories and all those other narratives in. Taking courses and attending seminars, again, would really, really recommend it. It's very useful to learn from other people. And it doesn't have to be a high profile journalist giving the interview. It's why you're all here. You know, I'm not someone who is an extremely high profile journalist, but I do love what I do. And I think that I do have a sense of self-belief in my qualifications. And what you can do when you attend seminars and take courses is gain qualifications, not qualifications that you can write down or get a certificate for, but qualifications that you've learned from other people, guidance that you've learned from other people. Taking notes on those is a useful way to learn how to write and to learn how to put things into structured papers and mannerisms. Be creative. So this is essential, I think. Being creative and bursting with ideas. Something that editors look for, and something that I look for as an editor, is someone who's enthusiastic about their subject, someone who's really interested in it, someone who's got lots of different ideas about where to go with it, maybe if that idea that they first pitched doesn't work. But I think another thing that you have to be really mindful of is you have to be passionate about your pitch. So you need to work and refine it and be passionate about it. But when you find out that the editor maybe wants a different angle on it, be open to other ideas and be creative with the idea that you've got. Writing down ideas helps you when you're structuring things. It's an essential part of pitching, is writing down the messy bullet point at the beginning, then growing it into perhaps a paragraph, and then growing it into 3 paragraphs for a pitch, and then growing it into an article from there. You know, these are useful things to know how to do, is just to write wherever you are and whenever you can, really. Learn more. That's what I'm doing right now, and I hope to do right now, and what I hope people who come to this session do, is to learn more. You can always learn more. You know, I'm green in the industry and want to learn more, and I'm always enthusiastic about learning more about the industry and about what I can write about and about different subjects that I can learn about, because I'm not qualified in every single subject, but I would love to be. You know, you learn about everything along the way, and it really helps you as a journalist to learn about things. And don't give up. This is essential when you're a journalist, because it can sometimes feel that the world is against you, your pitches are going nowhere. I felt like this before, but you can't give up, because it transcends everything else. When a pitch that you're passionate about, that you're enthusiastic about, especially when it's to do with wildlife, the environment, a specific organism or animal, a specific process in biology, when that goes through and when you see it up there and you see what people say about your article and the positive feedback, that is the best feeling in the world. And to be able to tell a story in that way is, above all else, I think, one of the best feelings in the world. So don't give up. Even if you don't think it's going anywhere, it will go somewhere if you're passionate about it. This quote, again, something that I really, really relate to, and something that I think is really useful when understanding anything about storytelling, anything about writing, and anything about journalism. Journalism is about bringing people to an event or something that they couldn't attend. You're really building an experience, and you're building a story and a narrative when you're writing about something, when you're being a journalist and making a difference. Even the most, you know, the articles that you don't think will make a difference, maybe a lifestyle article about something that you don't relate to, that's building an experience for someone. So when you understand what journalism is about, this is something that I think you really need to understand. If you want, you can listen to me rambling more on my Twitter at Go Wild for Bees, or Wild Heart with a Camera on Instagram. It's been amazing speaking to everyone and telling you about my experiences, and I hope everyone's enjoyed it. I hope it didn't ramble for too long, and I hope to talk to
No, it was
questions.
perfect. It was perfect. Thank you so much. So we just encourage you, if you want to send any questions, to send them in a box just to me if you want to remain anonymous, because it's very controversial or not, or you just don't want to get your name up, or just to everyone. I've got a couple of questions from social media. First one, I am struggling to find relevant sources for an article. How do you go around doing that?
So with this one, I also find this is the case. So when you're an environmental journalist, it can become very tricky. And I assume when you mean relevant sources, you mean maybe an article or a scientific paper, perhaps, or maybe
probably
something
would be that, I think, yes.
Yeah, maybe something like that, or perhaps a bit of writing that is to do with your subject. So Google Scholar is what I use in my dissertation and what I use for my article writing sometimes. It's extremely useful. You can type anything in there and it will give you scientific paper after scientific paper on relevant, subjects that are to do with your title, and you can read them. They're a bit wordy, but if you want to gain relevant information, I think it's worth it. Libraries, I always go to libraries. Online libraries, particularly useful in this era of Zoom and everyone being, online all the time. And something that I do a lot is put the word out on Twitter, or put the word out, on a social media account. If you ask, and I've done this before, I can't find any sources for this subject. Can anyone talk about it? Does anyone want to know? Does anyone know anything about it? Or does anyone know where they can point me in a direction? I've gained multiple people to interview and sources like this. It's really, really useful. The Twitter community, I think, are very, very good in that way. And you can even tweet, direct message people if that's what they're comfortable with, obviously.
Another question is about you and the future pieces you want to write. So a question is, who is the person you really want to interview? So over to you.
That's a hard one. I have always wanted to interview Jane Goodall. So yes. Jane Goodall is my absolute hero. She, if anyone doesn't know, I assume everyone should know, otherwise why don't you know? She's a primatologist and one of the most amazing people that I've ever seen, and just would be absolutely incredible to interview her, and Adam Lambert, who I think is the most amazing person on the planet, but that's not nature and environmental journalism, but you asked, so.
Perfect. I've got another question. Someone who's asking, would I need a background in biology to get into environmental journalism? You touched upon that a bit, but I think it might be a bit to do with feeling comfortable, and like biology being very specific and quite, university background.
Yeah.
You probably would feel like you need that. So what would be your take on it?
So I would say you don't need it, and don't feel disheartened if you don't have it. But as I said, it does help to know about your subject, and it does help to know about what you're doing. For environmental journalism, though, you don't need a degree in biology necessarily. You can do a degree in environmental science. You can do volunteering on reserves. That's experience enough for me, and that was experience enough for me and for the editors who I talked to in the beginning, when they knew I'd done work in the field, or if you've done work, or even if you have a passion for bird watching, or you go out and you do even studying bugs and doing surveys and that sort of thing, you don't need to have a degree or a qualification to do that, to be connected with the nature. And editors of nature magazines will see that. They will see that you have that passion if you talk about volunteering, if you talk about that sort of thing. So I wouldn't say you need a degree specifically in biology, but if that's what you want to do, I would say that's also extremely useful to have. But there are lots of other degrees around environmental conservation, ecology. There's so many different degrees that you can do if you want to be interested. Marine biology, if you want.
Great, thank you. If you've got more questions, just please put them in the box. So we've got another question, which is, I really feel like I don't know where to start. For starting well. Which publication would you say would be most adapted for my first article? I know you've already touched upon that a bit, but I really don't know where to start.
This is exactly where I was. I didn't know where to go because I wanted to get to that next level of writing for other people, not just, writing for my own blog or writing for other blogs. I wanted to write for magazines. And what I did was I found things on Instagram and Twitter, but I think, so the links are in the PowerPoint, and I'll put them on Twitter if anyone needs to see them. But Bloom and Doom magazine are very, very useful. If you just want one place to go and start and to go and write things for different people, they are almost my go-to, I would say. Bloom and Doom magazine are very, very useful to write for because they have a range of different people, all different backgrounds. Some have no qualifications in terms of STEM or science. They just love to write about nature. And you can pick out titles that you want. And that can be more useful for starting up when you're a journalist sometimes, instead of coming up with your own pitches, working towards other people's pitches and showing other people how you can work towards those pitches, I think is extremely useful. So Bloom and Doom magazine, I would say, go towards there. A focus on nature. I'm engagement officer for a focus on nature. And we love to publish, things about anything, any experience that you have. So you can actually, if you want, email me as engagement officer. I'll put the link on Twitter. I don't know if I can find the link now, but the link to our website is pretty easy to find, and you can find all of our contacts on the committee members page and email us about blog ideas you've got there, about article ideas you've got there. So Bloom and Doom magazine, a focus on nature, and Nature's Gold if you want. They're a bit slightly higher up, but if you've got something that you think's worth pitching and you're passionate about, go for it.
Perfect. We've got a bit more questions about the sources. So do you have any other sources apart from Google Scholar? Any other places you would go to find some reliable information, research?
I'm trying to think, because Google Scholar was the prominent one that I did use. If you're in university, the university library usually is useful as well, because they also provide very relevant and very well backed up sources. I'd say in terms of accessible information, I usually just use blogs, wildlife blogs, nature blogs. So there are people online who write various wildlife and nature blogs, and I can maybe put the links for these, or put the names for these wherever people want me to put them, like on Twitter. I didn't think about that actually. I probably should have put that in. But nature and wildlife blogs are a very accessible way to get information, because they're more useful than the articles that are written on Google Scholar sometimes, because they're a bit wordy, and the blogs are much more useful to look at. So I would say look for wildlife and conservation blogs. Lots of people do them. If you go to my blog, which is Wild Heart, which I can also link that, I have a list of wildlife and nature blogs that people can look at for different subjects. There are a lot of people who write about a lot of different subjects. They specialize in different subjects, and those are useful as well to look at if you want to get an idea of how to write and how to blog. So yeah, I can put that in as well.
Perfect. We've got a question. I think that'll be the last question for today. So many questions. That's lovely. So the question is, I'm a bit worried that I can't pitch because I don't have anything relevant about environmental and nature journalism. I've written other things though. Do you think that'll be enough?
So if you want to write for environmental and conservation journalism, I'd say be passionate about it, but you can, like I said, go to Bloom and Doom magazine and places like this, and they will have pitches ready-made that they want people to pick up on and write upon. And you might find that you're passionate about those when you read through them, and you might find that's something you're interested in. In terms of writing for other things, I do that as well. It's perfectly fine to not have any experience writing relevant topics if you think they're not relevant, but they might be for conservation and wildlife. But I'd say maybe work towards the titles that have already been pitched, and you can work towards them, and then afterwards gain some of your own ideas. And also go out and be connected with nature. I think being passionate about wildlife and nature is one of the most useful things you can have when you write for an environmental magazine, because it gives you experience and it gives you interest about things, and you might come across things and you think, oh, that's something I'm really interested in, and that could be relevant now, because, you know, and I never really realized that was relevant before. So it's not at all a problem if you write for other things. In fact, it can actually give you another perspective which other people might not have on the same subject.
Perfect. I will just finish. I'll just take over the screen share. So PressPad remote. Next week, what do we have? So next week we have speed networking session. You're more than welcome to join. We only accept registrations on Eventbrite until Monday morning, so make sure you get your ticket. It's perfect, exactly what we were talking about, isn't it? You need to make connections with people, and this is a really, really nice way to do it. We only have 20 spots, so it remains very cozy. Then we have every Wednesday between 12 and 12:30, we have an Instagram live Q&A, and it's just new people every week. So just check our Instagram on Monday, and you'll find out who is our guest this next week. Next masterclass is next Thursday. We will be talking about how journalists of color, can create their own space and spaces in journalism. And we also have a commissioning workshop, which is literally I would say, our best workshop, because we basically, you send us your pitch, and then a commissioning editor tells you how to improve it. So if you've never pitched anywhere, this is the workshop you want to attend. We need a few days to go through all the pitches we receive, so make sure you sign up before the event. So that will be the Friday before the event, and it's all already on Eventbrite as well. So you can just sign up now, send us your pitch. You don't have to be named or anything if you want to. Again, it's only 20 people, and we will be sending the recording afterwards if you can't make it. So it's always, obviously, if you send your pitch, you probably will want to attend, because then you can answer questions and you can get your pitch even better. So that's it. So this was PressPad Remote. Thank you so much for today. It was an absolute pleasure to learn from you, and I've been taking notes as well. So thank you so much.
Thank you for inviting me. It's been amazing, and I would recommend everyone go to this because it looks amazing and incredible, and I might be creeping in the background.
Yes, please do. please do. Have a really, really good evening, everyone. Go enjoy the weather. We still have a few hours of sun before it gets all dark, and it still gets all gloomy from this weekend. So go enjoy all of that, and make sure you stay in touch. Thanks, everyone.
Kept you all long enough. Be gone.
Bye, everyone.